All right, let's get into it. We're talking about a band that basically started as an art school project and ended up completely rewriting the rulebook for what a rock band could even be. This is the story of Talking Heads and how their kind of nerdy, anxious energy totally changed the game in popular music. But to really get a handle on their impact, you've got to ask this one big question. How in the world did four art students from the Rhode Island School of Design manage to flip the entire idea of a rock concert on its head and turn it into this piece of high-concept performance art? Well, the answer, believe it or not, is found by starting right at their absolute peak.
And yeah, that peak is their incredible 1984 concert film, Stop Making Sense. Look, this wasn't just a recording of a show. No way. It was a meticulously built artistic statement that put everything unique about the band right on display. It's really the key to understanding their entire journey.
They just systematically tore down the very idea of a rock show. I mean, the performance kicks off with a totally empty stage, just David Byrne and a boombox. And then song by song, another musician comes out, another piece of equipment gets rolled on, building the show right in front of your eyes. They only use this stark white light, which created these dramatic shadows instead of, flashy colors. The director, Jonathan Demme, even made sure to keep the camera off the audience until the very end, so it feels like you're right there on stage with them. And of course, there was the suit.
The big suit. I mean, this thing is now legendary, and it perfectly captures what they were all about. It was inspired by Japanese theater and was literally designed to make Byrne's body look huge and his head look tiny. As Byrne himself said, music is very physical, and often the body understands it before the head. It was a brilliant visual gag on the band's own name, a talking head on this massive, exaggerated frame. This was conceptual art you could actually dance to.
So how did they even get to this point? To get the suit, you have to get the school. So let's hit rewind and go all the way back to their art school origins, because that's where the entire intellectual DNA of this band was formed. So it all kicks off at RISD in the early 70s. That's where David Byrne and Chris Frantz meet and start bonding over all kinds of experimental sounds. They eventually move to a loft in New York City, and Frantz convinces his girlfriend, Tina Weymouth, to pick up the bass. Though famously, Byrne made her audition 3 separate times before she got the gig. Their first show as Talking Heads was in 1975, opening for the Ramones at the legendary club CBGB. The final piece of the puzzle slid into place in 77 when Jerry Harrison, a Harvard architecture grad, joined on keyboards and guitar. And just like that, the classic lineup was complete.
And right from the jump, they were different. While all their peers at CBGB, bands like the Ramones were all about leather jackets and raw aggression, Talking Heads went the other way. They cultivated this clean-cut but anxious vibe. It was a conscious choice to step away from all the typical rock star poses and present something that felt way more modern and honestly a little unsettling. Even their name was basically a piece of conceptual art. They literally found the term talking heads in a TV guide, where it was used to describe those simple head and shoulder shots of people just talking. And for them, it was perfect. It captured their whole mission to focus on the ideas, the content, and strip away all the usual rock and roll action.
Now, that super intellectual approach led them straight to the legendary producer Brian Eno. The work they did together, from 1978 to 1980, resulted in a trilogy of albums that wouldn't just define their sound, but would push the absolute boundaries of what pop music could even do. You can really see this collaboration happen in 3 clear steps. First, they started by tightening up their sound, really leaning into this rhythmic, danceable core. From there, they went to some darker, weirder places on Fear of Music, playing with what they called ethno-funk. But the real game changer was Remain in Light. On this record, they fused their post-punk instincts with the complex, hypnotic polyrhythms of Afrobeat legends like Fela Kuti. The result was this dense, layered masterpiece that honestly still sounds like it's from the future.
And don't make the mistake of thinking experimental means unpopular. No, Remain in Light was a big commercial success all over the world. It hit the top 20 here in the US and went gold. They proved that you could make this brainy, complex, artistic music that people would actually go out and buy.
So how did they do it? How did they make music that was so complex, but at the same time so incredibly infectious? Well, according to guitarist Jerry Harrison, the secret sauce was a concept from something called information theory. The idea is actually pretty simple. You keep the drum beat super steady, super repetitive. Your brain basically learns to tune it out, and that frees up mental space for you to process all the wild, interlocking guitar and keyboard parts layered on top. It's a brilliantly smart way to make you dance. But as the band got bigger and bigger,
a global phenomenon, the dynamic inside the group started to crack. The same intellectual intensity that fueled all that amazing creativity, well, it also planted the seeds for a really painful and very public breakup. Looking back on it now, David Byrne has admitted he became something of a little tyrant and that he wasn't the easiest person to work with. But for the rest of the band, the end came as a total shock. Chris France said he found out the band was over by reading about it in the Los Angeles Times. He said, as far as we're concerned, the band never really broke up. David just decided to leave.
And the bitterness, man, it ran deep. In the years after the split, Tina Weymouth gave this famously brutal assessment, calling Byrne a man incapable of returning friendship. It's a single line that just lays bare the massive personal rift that had torn the band apart. The tension really boiled over in 1996. That's when Harrison, France, and Weymouth tried to reform without Byrne, calling themselves simply the Heads. Well, Byrne immediately filed a lawsuit to stop them, arguing they were trying to profit from the Talking Heads name. The case was eventually settled, but the damage was...
But despite that acrimonious end, the band's influence is it's undeniable. It continues to echo through music today. Their unique blueprint for smart, artistic rock music has been picked up and played with by generations of artists.
I mean, the list of bands they influenced is just incredible. Radiohead, they literally got their name from a Talking Heads song. The whole dance punk thing from LCD Soundsystem owes a massive debt to their rhythmic experiments. You can hear David Byrne's quirky vocals and global sound all over bands like Vampire Weekend and Arcade Fire. They really did create a whole new language for ambitious rock music. And the members themselves, they never stopped creating. Jerry Harrison became this hugely successful producer for bands like Live and No Doubt. Chris France and Tina Weymouth had massive hits with their other band, Tom Tom Club. And David Byrne has had this amazing, wide-ranging solo career, even winning an Academy Award for his work on film scores. And, after decades of silence and bitterness, the story seems to have found a pretty peaceful ending. In 2023, for the 40th anniversary re-release of Stop Making Sense, all 4 original members actually reunited for a series of public interviews. They called it a happy ending, finally closing the book on one of music's most brilliant and, most turbulent histories. Which leaves us with one last really interesting question to chew on. In today's fragmented, algorithm-driven world of music, could a band this weird, this intellectual, this uncompromisingly experimental ever achieve that kind of massive mainstream success again? It's definitely something to think about.